What's up, wrestling fans? Chris Cash here with the voice of wrestling, and man, we've got a lot to talk about, and of course, as always, I'm joined by Nick, the man of 1,000 names. Can we just go retro and just call you that forever? I really think that we should, but Nick Paglino, senior editor, managing editor over at ProWrestling.com. Check them out, and of course, check us out in the chat room. All the news that you need as well over at voiceofwrestling.net. To check out the chat room, you can go to voiceofwrestling.net/live center. Of course, just go to the main site as well, and the link is above. Nick, what's going on, man? Hey, did you mute your mic? I can't hear you. Yeah, you did.
Oh, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Look, Nick never mutes his mic during the intro. He never does, and today he did, and so we're gonna cut him a little slack there because obviously you were trying to do a good thing. You're just not used to trying to do those things, though.
No, because I can never hear, but now I can hear. I have this beautiful gift of sound.
Yeah.
And I can hear our wonderful entrance music, which gets me pumped and rocking for the show. But yeah, like you said at the top of the show, we got a lot to talk about tonight. I am excited. I'm ready to dive in.
So we obviously talked, Nick, last week about a number of things, but we're not going to be talking as much about some of the stuff like the Brock Lesnar's of the world. We talked a ton about him. We do have a couple of comments that I think from some of our fans as far as them wanting to get our thoughts on a couple of things. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. However, I want to start off because I think this is kind of one of the bigger stories, and in my mind it is anyway, Nick, and because it hasn't really been announced yet, it's not 100% put out there by WWE, we're not talking about it quite as much, but I really think by WrestleMania, Undertaker and John Cena are going to be a massive thing going into it. And the only reason that I think, and that's kind of what I wanted to start the conversation off with, Nick, is I really honestly believe this is going to be the Undertaker's last match. I think John Cena does the job. I think obviously he ends up going out there and giving Undertaker another win. One of the things we want to ask the chat room, however, to comment on is, did you think, now in hindsight, looking back, did we get more out of the Undertaker's streak ending versus its remaining intact? What would have been your preference, and what did you think? Me and Nick are going to talk about that in just a little bit. We want to know your thoughts as well. Get in the live chat room and let us know. However, let's kind of put a pin in that particular conversation, Nick, and start off with, what do you think as far as this match? Do you believe this is Undertaker's last one?
Well, no, I don't believe it's his last match. You know, I think, and again, of course, this is the topic every year, right?
Sure.
Is it the Undertaker's last match? And honestly, I really feel like that will only ever be determined based exactly how the Undertaker feels a month before WrestleMania. You know, and, you know, like John Cena referenced last week on Raw, we've been seeing all the training videos. We know he's in the gym. I think, honestly, when, you know, January rolls around and the Undertaker gets back in the gym and he starts training, I really think how his body responds to that is really what dictates whether or not he's going to have that match. You know, last year, look what happened. He took off all the gear. He took off all the Undertaker garb. He laid it in the middle of the ring. It was really giving this 99% concrete proof that he was done, you know, that he was hanging it up. You know, the announce team sort of put over Roman Reigns, ending the career of The Undertaker. But in this world of television, you can always bring someone back. Hey, look, Roseanne is starting again at the end of this month. And the last time Roseanne was on television, the classic sitcom, the lead character, Dan, John Goodman's character, he died. Well, he's coming back to the show. So, you know, you can't really write somebody off TV more permanently than death. And they're bringing him back for the new incarnation of the show. That's the magic of television. You can always bring somebody back. So, you know, despite what we saw last year and how definitive that might have been for some of the fans as proof that The Undertaker's done, they can always be brought back. And I think what that sort of leads us to is, and maybe the way the Undertaker comes back is, of course, what version of the Undertaker comes back, and we can get into that. And again, I'd love to see some fan opinions. Do people think the Dead Man is coming back? Do we see the return of the American Badass Undertaker? And he's even had some various incarnations, and riffs on the classic Dead Man character. But to answer your question originally, no, I don't think that this is going to be the Undertaker's last match. I think, like every year, I think they're going to sort of leave it open-ended. And, Chris, and you tell me what you think here, because the opponent is John Cena, which is really a guy that we've talked about this before, neither of them needs to win that match. Now that the streak is done, the Undertaker could lose, Cena could lose. It's really such an open-ended, creative way they could go with this match that, no, I think this year the Undertaker gets that win, and I think, again, it's open-ended for next year. I think he does have one final match because, honestly, I think they're going to tie in that last match with the Hall of Fame induction, which as of now, I don't think is going to happen, of course, because I think he'll be announced as that year's headline.
I tend to agree that they could leave this open-ended. I'm not going to say that they won't. However, I feel, Nick, like it's a little bit of a risk to do that at this point, especially year after year, knowing that, I don't know how. I'm assuming he works out during the year. It's not like he just gets around, he eats what he wants, does what he wants for 10 months. And then a couple of months out, he's like, I better start, the new year rolls around. He's like, maybe I should start working out or something. I think clearly he's going to keep in shape overall, but year after year, we get down to this where, all right, is the Undertaker going to be involved in WrestleMania? And he obviously has to come out. There's going to be a time, though, where his body just won't allow that, and I feel like they need a definitive stamp on his career. I agree with you. I like the idea of tying that into the WrestleMania, and if they feel like they can get one more solid year out of him next year, it would not surprise me if that's the time the Undertaker does it, because you just can't keep doing the open-endedness that you're talking about at this point. I feel like they have to bookend his career, and of course his career at WrestleMania. It's appropriate. It makes a lot of sense. But that's part of the reason why maybe, like you just brought up Roseanne, though, Nick, if they wanted, we've talked about the idea of Shawn Michaels coming out of retirement. That looks like it's sticking. But they could always get away with the idea of, if they wanted to, Nick, if they wanted to do it where they said, hey, this is his last match, then then the following year, they probably are at that point going, everything builds around him with the Hall of Fame induction at that point. If they wanted to bring him out of retirement, they could. The fans aren't going to care or mind. But here's the only reason that I think it's important that you announce when his last match is going to be and set a date, is because at some point the fans need to adjust in their minds that he will not be there. They have to adjust in the sense of, WrestleMania will be more of a disappointment every year when Undertaker's not going to be there. That one year that they think he's going to be, because they don't announce it ahead of time, the year prior that was his last match, they're going to be pissed. I would be pissed. I mean, every time they leave it open for next year, I'm assuming he's going to be there. Everybody's going to have to adjust their mentality that, look, Undertaker's not going to be at Mania going forward. His career is over, and I feel like WWE understands. I really would be surprised if they don't understand, just like they're doing with Brock, Nick, recently, trying to say, hey, we don't know what his schedule is going to be after Mania. We need to really start making him seem kind of like the afterthought. Let's build up these other couple of guys, because he's been at the forefront of our business for such a long time. They had the forethought to do that. I think they're going to think the same way when it comes to WrestleMania and Undertaker's role there, which has been pivotal for years. And I feel like they have to book in that at some point. They need to announce it's the last match. Undertaker and John Cena. Who else is it, Nick? I mean, unless he's putting over one other guy, taking a loss potentially on his last final match, what's the point of it? Who else is there besides John Cena that makes any sense at this point?
Well, what really does make sense? I mean, ever since he lost the streak, there really hasn't been any reason for The Undertaker to wrestle at WrestleMania.
Well, sure.
Aside from potentially helping put somebody over.
Well, or big
But
matches like John Cena,
putting
Undertaker.
over, though, they're really already established talents.
Sure.
And this is one of the reasons why there was a lot of, immediate fan backlash to Brock Lesnar ending the streak, because a lot of people felt like that was not a guy that The Undertaker needed to put over. At that time, you're putting over some of the younger guys. You're putting over a Dolph Ziggler or a mid-card talent who really needs that win to take the next step up to the main event picture, not a guy like a Brock Lesnar. He doesn't need to be putting over a Roman Reigns necessarily, certainly not a John Cena. So personally, I don't think he is needed to be at WrestleMania. And, to go along with what you're saying, I believe that it would be the best option to announce, that this will be, let's say if it is next year, 2019, you announce in January, this is going to be it. You could even do a thing with Vince McMahon where it was very similar to Ric Flair, where, he says, that's it. Maybe he cuts somewhat of a heel promo saying this is the Undertaker's swan song, and then it's announced he will be in the Hall of Fame, and from a ticket sales standpoint, to help move tickets for the Hall of Fame, that's your major draw right there. But I don't necessarily know that WWE needs to or really wants to at this point announce that for the fans, because the question becomes, and I don't know how much you can answer this or even if I can, what is the Undertaker's draw at WrestleMania? Are people still buying tickets to see The Undertaker at WrestleMania? And when he's not going to be there anymore, are we going to see ticket sales taking a hit because of that? I don't know that he's that major of a WrestleMania component anymore, that, WWE would be okay with stringing you along every year without giving you sort of that definitive announcement before the event.
I have a really hard time going along with the idea that The Undertaker is not a definitive, like he's not a pivotal role anymore at WrestleMania. Obviously, maybe not like he has been in the past. Brock Undertaker was a huge match. What was it after that? Was that Roman?
Roman. Yeah, but let me, just to interrupt you real fast, I'm talking about, in November, usually that's kind of when the tickets go on sale. I mean, what percentage of fans, if you had to guess really, and again, I know we can't really put a number on it, but what percentage of fans in November, without knowing anything about the card, are going in and saying, I'm buying my ticket to WrestleMania next year because I want to see The Undertaker?
Yeah, I get that.
And then what portion of that fan base then would be upset to find out Undertaker's not going to be there that year?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I guess I understand to the point that I don't know that I could obviously give a number on that. It's tough to say. I mean, I guess I can only take
like
my own personal thing, Nick, is, I mean, do I feel that way?
Bigger years ago, and it's starting to dwindle at this point.
Right. For me, it's now, yes, agreed. I mean, it's not like the days where you're expecting it. Well, and I think, you know what it is, honestly, Nick, for me, here's really the definitive at this point for me. It's no longer the point where you're expecting it to be the match of the year. That's what's changed at this point. Sure. Brock and Undertaker was nowhere close. It was really Brock and Undertaker that I think changed that mentality, that every single year you're going to expect Undertaker and whoever he's wrestling, because that was the emphasis. It wasn't so much what's best for storyline even though Shawn Michaels 2 times, Triple H, all of that, even though those made a lot of sense storyline-wise as well, that's not what they were expecting The Undertaker to go out there and one more time, if that's all he ever had at that point, they were expecting him to go tear the house down, and he did. Brock Lesnar put a stop to that. The Brock Lesnar-Undertaker match was really not very good. And obviously, I think ever since then, fans started thinking, this isn't the same old Undertaker.
Right.
And
I think there was that asterisk, though, in that match, because we do know that Undertaker suffered what I believe at that point was a concussion very early on in the match.
Yeah.
So he wasn't able to compete and really, finish that match. Well, finish it. I mean, because it happened so early on, he really wasn't even be able to do maybe 3/4 of that match the way he wanted to or could. So maybe even WWE was looking at that and saying, all right, we'll give him a pass because he suffered that injury. And I think he's held up reasonably well since.
No, I agree. I agree with you. I think that obviously at the end of the day, I don't look at this as a situation where I feel like it's going to be Undertaker isn't as big of a deal at WrestleMania. But I wouldn't be surprised, Nick, if they go into this thinking, look, the Hall of Fame can be separated. Next year, it's all about Undertaker. Yeah. It really comes down to Undertaker's decision, most likely, as far as whether they leave this open-ended, whether he wrestles next year, or whether John Cena Undertaker is the last one. I won't be surprised. I'm kind of with you. The way that it's been built up at this point, not a lot of time left either. I really don't know that this is his last year, even though I really hope, my only hope in all of this, whether it's this year, next year, whatever, is that they obviously put a stamp on it and a close and say, this is it, because I think fans do need to adjust, even if they don't look at his role there like they used to. That being said, Nick, now let's just quickly jump into, in hindsight, real quick, do you think that it was a good decision to end the streak the way they did? I mean, first let me ask you, do you think that they should have ended the streak, period? Not necessarily to Brock or somebody else. I mean, do you think at some point that streak was meant to be or should have been broken?
Yeah, because, again, it serves the best interest of storytelling. I think I'd heard it been said before. I can't remember who said it. And I think I agree with this evaluation, which is that because it isn't a real sport, if this was a competitive sport, God no, what an incredible thing. You quit while you're ahead. Look at Floyd Mayweather. Here's a guy who's undefeated. If I were him, I'd never step back into the ring again so I could preserve that streak. But because this was a story crafted streak that went on for so long, it surpassed 2 decades. I love the idea of it being broken. And I think, man, hearkening back to our old days of doing this show, we talked about that a lot. We anticipated. Yep. I really anticipated who is it going to be, because we all kind of figured there would be that right guy for the job. I don't know if we all agreed that it was Brock Lesnar that would be the one to end that streak. But yes, I think it was, because if you set up that storyline, it's like rules. They're made to be broken, know, and so are these kinds of storylines, I think, in pro wrestling. Much like Goldberg's giant win streak in WCW, you couldn't wait to see it being broken, and who is going to be the guy that does that. The same thing could be said for Asuka right now, and we talked about that not too long ago too. Charlotte Flair, will she be the one that breaks that streak? So yes, I do believe that it should have been broken. I still, the jury may still be out for me as to whether or not it should have been Brock Lesnar. Would I like to have seen a guy like Bray Wyatt be the one to end that streak? And what really could that have done for him? Yes. But, I can also understand the idea of why it was Brock Lesnar. And look what it has done for him in legitimizing him. Not that he wasn't legitimate before, but really helping to just kind of legitimize him as that absolute unbeatable monster in WWE that really, honestly, has carried him up to this point that we are at, heading into WrestleMania 34, setting up Roman Reigns to be that guy that finally defeats him.
Yeah, and I think I tend to agree with you. I think the streak should have been broken. I know we're asking some people in the chat room. Jasmine Parson did say, no, I don't think Taker should have stayed intact, or she thinks that Taker's streak should have stayed intact. Yep. WrestleMania 28 also, she said, was the perfect send-off. He was 20-0. The problem with that is, yeah, that's a nice round number, but really, who cares if you get as many years left as we ultimately have gotten? His matches have gone downhill, but I think Undertaker's presence in general, putting guys over, just being involved at Mania, obviously makes a lot more sense to worry about than a round number for him to leave off on. But I do think the streak should have been broken. Nick, obviously, I'm pretty sure I was an advocate of that from every year when we would talk about, is this the guy that does it? I remember being very, very on board with it eventually ending. Brock Lesnar, I'm kind of with you. I don't know that there's been enough to say at this point whether Brock ultimately did a good job with that or not, because for me now with that situation, it's what has Brock done with it? Brock obviously has done a good job. I think Brock has carried the show and the company pretty well, but did he do enough in the end, taking that the momentum that he got from the streak to help ultimately put somebody else over. And here's what it is, Nick. When you think about Brock Lesnar, has he really put anybody over, with the exception of, have they really even booked him to put anybody over, with the exception of Roman Reigns? That's it. They're trying to.
That is a great point.
They're really, he's the only guy.
Yeah. That is a fantastic point. And that, now that we're asking this question, which, because, I think this is the most important time, or this is the most pertinent time to be asking the question whether or not the streak should have ended. Not then, not the day after it happened, not 2 days after it happened, because we haven't seen the effects of the streak happening,
right,
or ending. Now we've finally seen it, because here we are several years later, the streak has ended. Has Brock Lesnar earned that right in hindsight now to end the streak? And honestly, Chris, I got to tell you, the only guy he's really put over is Roman Reigns, because we know he's going to put Roman Reigns over at WrestleMania. It's already happened. He's already put Roman Reigns over at a WrestleMania. So this will give Roman Reigns his second win over Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. So it was going back to last year. I mean, you look at it, he beats Goldberg, and then he spends this entire year really tearing through the upper echelon of the Raw roster. Yeah. He's beating the Samoa Joes, the Braun Strowmans, the Finn Balors, all of the top guys on his way to facing Roman Reigns. So in hindsight, was he the guy to end the streak?
Yeah, you could make a very solid argument for no.
For no, you could make a very solid argument. Again, if you look at what it amounts to, I think there are a lot of people that at the end of the day are going to argue yes, because, well, if it sold tickets, if it made Brock Lesnar a bigger and better box office attraction right after it happened, if all of those pay-per-views he's appeared on, and I'm not even talking about WrestleMania, any of the pay-per-views that he either defended the title or appeared on in general, if he was able to sell more tickets based on him defeating the streak and getting that boost, then yes, from a business standpoint, you might argue that absolutely it was worth it. But if you look at it overall, leading to now, you could really make that argument that no, he wasn't the guy. And what if here we were now at this WrestleMania 34 coming up in New Orleans, and a Bray Wyatt or a Finn Balor or a Dean Ambrose or a Seth Rollins, that was the guy.
Yeah.
That defeated the streak, and now you've created a bona fide superstar, as opposed to someone in Roman Reigns, who I think is already the top guy. He's already the big dog. I mean, here's a guy that beat The Undertaker last year and declared himself the big dog in WWE.
Right. And I this is a good way to kind of transition as well to another topic that I wanted to talk about this week. But I think really looking back on this, and I don't know that I ever really looked at it this way, but I've started to, because of some of the stories that have come out about him, and of course this next topic. But I really think when you look back on this, here's the issue they ran into with Brock, and then we'll move on. I think they booked him like that he was a full-time wrestler. I think it would have been okay if he broke the streak and he was an active full-time wrestler, but you knew that wasn't going to be the case with Brock. If they had him week in and week out all the time, it's a different ball game through and through, because no doubt it helped his momentum, it helped his stock, but did they use that to really help anybody else's? Had he been there full time, Raw after Raw, pay-per-view after pay-per-view, yes, and most pay-per-views he's there, but he's just not active enough on free TV to get enough out of him to really use and milk the momentum that he had coming out of that streak, beating the streak, to then saying, you know what, we're going to use this to push and catapult as many people as we possibly could, because at the end of the day, they didn't never really do that. They didn't ever have time. They've been building Brock around 4 or 5 big pay-per-views a year, with limited appearances on Raw and everything like that. I think they looked at him when they decided to let him break the streak. They're thinking, look, he's as full-time as we need him for, and I don't know that's really how he was, obviously, looking back, and I think it's kind of hurt them in the end. And speaking of, it kind of transitions into Ronda Rousey, there was a huge report last week, Nick, about how she was supposed to be at Raw. She wasn't there. There's some that aren't even positive she's going to make every single Raw between now and Mania. It seems like there is some clarification on that. So before I go into this, I want to kind of let you just give us the quick update on Ronda and whether or not she actually, like, what's the actual story about that? Because I think there's been some misunderstanding and miscommunication there.
Yeah, and guys, for the latest on Ronda Rousey, her status, Brock Lesnar, all of your professional wrestling news and notes, you can go check out more over at ProWrestling.com. We've been covering it since last week, but really the latest here is that the announcement that WWE made, which is that she would appear on every single Raw heading into WrestleMania 34, was actually a mistake. That was someone, we don't know who it is, but it was someone working for WWE, in some smaller department of WWE that posted the announcement incorrectly. All of the other social media departments for WWE, and of course they have so many different social media accounts. There's the WWE account, WWE Network account, WWE UK, WWE NXT. All of these accounts ran with the announcement. The announcement made its way all the way to Raw that night, where they actually released a backstage video of Mike Rome making that announcement. But really what had happened was it was a mistake. Ronda Rousey was actually not scheduled to be at Raw in Detroit. She was actually scheduled to be in Pittsburgh that night because she was undergoing required medical testing for WrestleMania and for WWE. But for anyone out there who was concerned that maybe this was a case of Ronda Rousey no-showing or deciding to pull a Brock Lesnar and didn't want to come to work that night, that was not the case. Ronda Rousey wanted to be there. When she learned in hindsight about the mistake, she had wanted to be there and would have been there. But this was a simple case of her not actually being scheduled to be at that Raw, but someone in WWE making a mistake and incorrectly announcing that she would be on every show heading into WrestleMania. Now, since that happened, WWE has added her to advertisements for, well, we're just a few weeks away from the show now, but she will be appearing at every city that is hosting Raw until WrestleMania 34. And so that is the latest on her status heading into New Orleans.
So I think the question that I really have as far as kind of an umbrella approach to look at this high altitude of Ronda Rousey, we know they have a big star in her. She's already been announced. That was another story that I saw on ProWrestling.com. She's already been announced for next year's WrestleMania. So clearly they have plans for her. Now, I think she's more committed. She's a huge fan at this point. She's not jaded to the business like Brock Lesnar has, but there's a lot of similarities and comparisons you can make when it comes to Ronda Rousey's position with the company and the same risks and concerns that I ultimately have with her that I did with Brock Lesnar. And as much as I'm on the bandwagon of Ronda Rousey, and I think she's going to really elevate a lot of women specifically, which you just have not had a superstar like that come along that's going to allow that to happen. I think Asuka's great for the division. I think obviously Charlotte Flair's been great for the division, but in the end, nobody stands anywhere close to what Ronda Rousey is bringing, the attention that she's bringing to the WWE, the women's division, and anybody that steps foot in that ring next to her. Now, this first one, it makes a lot of sense. Nobody's really gaining much at this point as far as Ronda Rousey's concerned. Kurt Angle doesn't really need it. Triple H, Stephanie McMahon, it's good that they get some recognition. It's really just a way to ease Ronda in at this point because we've seen, based on her appearances, Nick, at this point, that she needs some work. I mean, she needs some work on the mic. She needs some work when she's not on the mic and she's just reacting to people talk to her because that seems to come very unnaturally for her in a lot of ways. And then I think she's going to obviously need a lot of work in the ring. Just some of the interaction and physical altercation she's had at this point, clearly she's going to need some work there. No questions about it, though, that she is to women's wrestling like Brock Lesnar in a lot of ways is. That crossover, everything, tons of publicity. There's going to be a lot. Rock and John Cena obviously are similar now. They get a lot of recognition as well. But for women, she is the bar. And I think my concern, though, Nick, is I love the fact that she wants to be full-time, but here's the problem. You can't And as much as people may get disappointed, the fact that she wasn't there last week, etc., despite all that, Nick, you cannot have her on for the next year or 2 years. You cannot have her interacting and acting in any way, shape, or form like or with the other divas. You just can't. She is not the same. She is a draw through and through, and she will not be as much of a draw if you see her every single week, every single pay-per-view, etc. You can't do that with her, or she loses her appeal. I mean, there's no question about that. You eventually get tired, or at least used to, seeing people that you see. And that's the appeal of Brock Lesnar. That's why he's still money. That's clearly why John Cena is still money. That's why I've argued forever, Nick, that wrestlers should take time off, be forced to take a couple of months off at times, because then when they come back, they're immediately a big star. Imagine if CM Punk, who again, people were jaded to him, he was jaded to the business. It showed in how they responded to him. It showed how CM Punk interacted with everything that he did with the business. If he came back tomorrow, he is tenfold a bigger star than what he was when he left. And I feel, and then he's a money man. Then he can make his own way. That's the type of stuff I feel like every wrestler should leave and come back. Rusev, we talked about last week, Nick. Rusev, take a few months off, come back bigger, stronger. That's a way, A, to shed the gimmick, B, to bring him back as a bigger star if you think he's the guy. I honestly think every couple of years you need to recycle these guys to a degree just within themselves. Take them off TV, bring them back. Brock Lesnar has proven that. Everybody else that I've mentioned and other people that I haven't mentioned has proven taking some time off does help your stock. And I think Ronda, she can't be like everybody else. It's not a good idea. And it's really going to ruin her before they really even get started. What do you think?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, we've seen it so many times with other wrestlers. Look at Dolph Ziggler. I mean, what a great example. And Ziggler actually did an interview recently where he revealed that after he did that angle, when he won the title at Clash of Champions, and then he came out on SmackDown the next night and he, dropped the title and walked off and no one knew what his status was, he urged WWE officials to keep him off of television for one whole year. And I thought it would have done him wonders. Yep. He ended up being off television for a whole 4 weeks. And even that really wasn't enough, especially in the capacity that they brought him back. But you're exactly right. Wrestlers sort of rotating like that and taking time off would be great for them. It would really increase their star power when they come back. And Ronda Rousey is somebody that I really believe should be patterned off of someone like a Brock Lesnar. Look what happened with Big Show. For years, people were always saying that Big Show should have been a special attraction wrestler. And that's a guy that became so watered down week after week that you had fans chanting, "Please retire," at shows because they just didn't want to see him on television anymore. Not to say that that's going to happen with Ronda Rousey, but you just don't want to go down that path. And Chris, one thing I haven't liked about her debut, and I am very appreciative in interviews, and I think this is fine. And when I say interviews, I'm talking about not the WWE televised interviews, but interviews she's doing with media outlets and things like that, the ESPN interviews, where she's speaking about signing with WWE. And she really sounds, like you said, genuinely enthused to be working with the company. She comes off as a huge fan. This is a lifelong dream. But the way they're portraying it on television is almost like with the authority saying over and over again, they seem to reinforce this every week that, Ronda Rousey is living her dream. She's finally in WWE. They're putting over themselves.
That's true.
So much where it's like, well, she's done the UFC thing, and yeah, she was a fighter and she had a great record in fighting. And then, she's done the movie thing. But WWE, that's the pinnacle. And I understand having to put your company over, but don't you think there's just too much of them reminding you week in and week out that Ronda Rousey is so happy to be here? And she's doing it in promos. She's saying it in ring promos. I'm so thrilled to be here. This is my dream. Oh my God, I'm headlining WrestleMania. What an honor. I can't believe it's almost like they're making her bow down at the feet at the shrine that is WWE, and really trying to convince the fans that this is the pinnacle of her career.
Yeah,
not anything she's done in the past. This is the pinnacle of her career.
And I think that is kind of Vince McMahon, not so much taking a shot at UFC, but really looking at like, hey, you've got this huge UFC star that's putting over me and my company as her dream. It is him patting himself on the back. And I think in normal press coverage, that would be one thing. In the promos, I do think it's hindering what she should be doing, which is she needs to be a badass. She needs to be the
absolutely.
And I agree with you there. I think a lot of the stuff that she's doing is a little bit sugar-coated to a degree, but what's interesting though, a very interesting dynamic about her is she's got this sweet dynamic about her, and then when she's ready to fight, I mean, I think I saw a little clip on her with her on Ellen, and they kind of, that's what they were talking about, was just like, hey, you've got this mean face, man, that when you're all sweet and innocent, and then you go to this mean mugging thing where you look, and she talked about how her father always taught her to look through her eyebrows and stuff, and that's kind of how it worked. And so I think that's an interesting dynamic for her. I mean, I think she's done some of that well, but I agree.
You know who could learn? You know who could learn about the facial expressions when you're in the ring?
Who's that?
The fighting face.
Yeah. Your
favorite wrestler of all time, the modern day Maharaja, Jinder Mahal. He could go from the to the more Ronda Rousey. So maybe Ronda Rousey can work with
Jinder Mahal. All right.
Let's start. We've seen everything else on Jinder Mahal get a lot bigger in size.
That's true.
Maybe it's time to throw some injections into those eyebrows, and we can really get that game face. We can elevate that game.
You know what? I'm not going to stand down though. Every week you can find a way to incorporate Jinder Mahal into the conversation and put me down for liking the guy. But you know what? That's fine.
I'll do it, and then I'll become the man of 1,000 Jinder Mahal.
Jinder Mahal references.
I can work him into 1,000 episodes.
So look, I think Ronda, they're in a little bit of a slippery slope. I think they've got to make sure on a couple of fronts that they don't treat her like another wrestler, because she's far from it, but it's easy to make her look like one. And that was my big story coming out, like my big opinion coming out of the stories about how she wasn't going to be there last week, might not have even been promoted, and might not have been on the shows leading into WrestleMania, despite whether she's available and she's okay to do it. Regardless, I don't know if I don't think it's the right idea. I think they've got to look at her as a prize fighter. I mean, that's really what Brock brought to the table, and that's really what she ultimately brings to the table. So I really hope they find a way to utilize her as they start incorporating her into matches with some of these actual young women, the forefront of the division, versus compared to obviously what they're doing this first time out with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon. But I am at least interested to see how she develops over the coming months, because she's got a lot of work to do, but she's Ronda Rousey, and it just doesn't really, she really couldn't do much wrong at this point. Right. I don't think that she could, but what I do think they could do wrong is use her too much.
I agree. And, the final thing I'll say about this is, looking forward to the match at WrestleMania, I know there's a lot of people who are sort of disappointed with the idea of her in the tag match. Maybe they would have wanted to see a singles match. Maybe they would have wanted to see that Charlotte Flair match. I actually think this is the perfect match for Rousey, especially because she's new.
Sure.
The worst thing that could happen is to book someone like Ronda Rousey in a singles match against WWE's finest, say an Asuka or a Sasha Banks or a Charlotte Flair, and Rousey is exposed. That would be the worst thing that can happen.
Sure.
So I think the tag match is perfect because, as we've talked about in the past, you can have Triple H and Kurt Angle, doing the grunt end of the work of this match. Like I said, that's my prediction here. I think you're going to see Triple H and Kurt Angle carrying this thing, building up to that hot tag for Stephanie McMahon and Ronda Rousey to finally come in. Ronda's going to hit a couple of, big well choreographed spots to make her look good. Tap out Stephanie McMahon. You're going to get that big WrestleMania moment that can be all over ESPN and all over mainstream sports media and all over websites like ours, like ProWrestling.com. And she's going to come out looking great, and she's going to be protected. And then you build up to that big match for next year's WrestleMania or the year after. You know, if this were a one-time shot, who knows? But we know she's full-time now. So you've got plenty of time to build to that Asuka match or that Charlotte match. Let her get some ring work under her belt. Let her get familiar with the ring. So I think this is the best way to go about booking Ronda Rousey for WrestleMania 34.
Daniel Bryan, huge topic this week. Want to talk a little bit about him as well, because there was an interview with him where he talked about, hey, I've went to every doctor. Every doctor they're sending me to is giving me the green light. They're clearing me to wrestle, yet I'm still not cleared. But he did say also that maybe they're getting a little closer, does not have a definitive, doesn't know, obviously, if he's going to. And I also saw a report, Nick, there's a couple of things coming out about Daniel Bryan over this past week or so, about how maybe he there's a new story out, I guess, about maybe he turned down a match at WrestleMania 34, this year's WrestleMania. But they also talked about how his contract is semi-unique in the sense that if he did leave at the end of his contract, he could show up on another card, another event, pretty much immediately thereafter, because he's not going to have that 90-day no-compete or whatever no-compete rule that they have in the contract. I don't know that I see that happening, but I do know that he said plenty of times in the past that he wants to wrestle again, and if he doesn't get the opportunity in WWE, he would leave to get that opportunity. I think he trusts at this point that he's safe to be able to wrestle. But I don't know if I don't know that WWE is going to risk losing him. I don't know that they put as much stock into it as they should, but I don't know that they're going to risk losing him if they know for a fact he's leaving to go work somewhere else. So yeah, there's been a lot of that, but it's a huge story in the sense that, this year's WrestleMania, I mean, already a fairly decent card, Nick, in my mind. I think it's not bad anyway. I think it's got a lot of stuff going into it that's going to be interesting to see how they do. But as far as Daniel Bryan is concerned, what's WWE's play here? I mean, obviously, I don't know if you have any more information, if ProWrestling.com's put something up that I haven't seen, but it really feels like this is I understand the risk and concern that, and the pressure WWE might feel, but I really don't know if that's it. Like, I just, at this point, if the reports are true, and it's not even reports, it's what he is saying, that he's been to every doctor, they're all saying, hey, you're good to go, yet WWE is still not ready to pull that trigger. Maybe there's something more. And if there's not, then you just assume at this point, Nick, that it's inevitable. It's inevitable that he's going to come back. Do they want him on this Mania? Do they really want Daniel Bryan's return to be something that isn't truly large scale? Maybe they want to put it off for that reason. But at the end of the day, Daniel Bryan returning is truly a remarkable thing given the circumstances and what we've heard and what we've expected from him at this point. I really do. I mean, what is WWE's play at this point? Do you feel like there's any other reasons why they are slow rolling this? Why they're so cautious? I mean, is it truly his health? Is there something else maybe? Or are they just simply saying, yeah, it's probably going to happen at this point, and we're just going to wait until we're ready creatively for it? Because it could be as simple as that.
Well, that could be true. I mean, it could be. Just to add, I think you pretty much covered what we have. Just to add a little bit more of it, and again, you can check out all of our coverage on Daniel Bryan's situation at ProWrestling.com. But the idea is that he's been using these hyperbolic chamber treatments, which have had significant benefits on other professional athletes. They've seen some very good results from that. And I guess the idea is that there has been a little bit more of a positive direction movement in Daniel Bryan's situation. And, it very well could be that WWE has said, hey, look, maybe in the past week or so, we have seen some positive news come out of this situation to the point where we might be able to clear him. But we're 3 weeks away. We're 4 weeks away. We're 5 weeks away, which is still not that much time away from the biggest pay-per-view of the year. Creatively, I don't think we could pull the trigger on putting him into a match, because what would we put him in? And the question would be, where do you book Daniel Bryan right now? I think the obvious position, and when you had talked about the report, and this was an unconfirmed report, this is a rumor that's been going around speculating that WWE did offer Daniel Bryan a spot in a match at WrestleMania 34. It would be a non-wrestling role. It would be a very limited physical role. My guess would have been, and again, this is not confirmed, but my guess would have been Daniel Bryan working as maybe the special guest referee. I fully expect that Shane McMahon will be added to the announced matchup between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn at WrestleMania 34. The idea would probably be Shane McMahon is the special guest referee, what becomes a triple threat match involving Owens versus Shane versus Zayn.
Right.
And then, the match maybe would have entailed Daniel Bryan not knowing who to count the pin for, because of course he's had issues with all three guys. Maybe he would take a small referee bump, get pulled out of the ring, that kind of thing. But Daniel Bryan was uninterested in that. He turned that role down, because probably for Daniel Bryan, if he's going to get back into the ring, it's going to be all or nothing. And do you have Daniel Bryan then all of a sudden, if he is cleared just a few weeks before WrestleMania 34, do you have him work a high-profile matchup against maybe a Shane McMahon or a Kevin Owens or a Sami Zayn? There's got to be some ring rust there. Even as great of a professional as he is, there's definitely, a guy hasn't wrestled in such a long time. There's got to be some ring rust there. Could he really pull off? And the expectations would be through the roof for a guy like Daniel Bryan. So maybe the situation, like you said, is let's hold off a little bit right now. Maybe we can get this guy cleared sometime after WrestleMania. And hey, does he have to return then at WrestleMania 35? Or maybe you have him return at SummerSlam. Maybe you build to a really big singles match at SummerSlam, or even a pay-per-view like Survivor Series or the Royal Rumble next year. But yeah, it's the play, honestly, Chris, for me is, I believe at the end of the day, and if you want to look at this optimistically or from a Good Samaritan point of view, WWE is looking out for Daniel Bryan's health. But you could also look at this from the more, cynical business standpoint, which is it would be a PR nightmare to have him get in the ring again. And who knows, a year from now, 2 years from now, maybe even during the match, he gets his bell rung in a match and he suffers some kind of permanent damage or some kind of permanent injury due to getting back in the ring. That would be an absolute PR nightmare for WWE. Look at how careful they have been with situations like Hulk Hogan, like the Fabulous Moolah Battle Royal. That instantly backfired on the company. Now they've had to drop the name, rechange it to the Women's WrestleMania Battle Royal due to all of that scrutiny that came of that announcement. I just don't know. If I had to guess, I would say this is the reason why they are being so careful with Daniel Bryan. They would just want to avoid any kind of PR nightmare that could come from a possible injury that he sustains if they clear him to return to the ring.
And I just want to say, obviously, I've had my thoughts about Daniel Bryan going way back when. I didn't see him as the big star that he has turned out to be. I missed the mark on that one, but I'll own up to it, and also say that I think that it's a huge missed opportunity. If every expert you're saying at this point, your hands are at least clean, and I really don't think WWE is looking at it that way. I think the health is part of it. I'm not going to say, obviously, they've kept him out of the ring this long. Clearly, they're concerned with that exact thing that you just mentioned, Nick. So I 100% understand that and respect it. But this isn't just you making that decision. This is a guy who obviously has a career. this really does need to be his decision as well. I mean, when you're getting the clearances from the experts that you trust, then for you to still sit back and say, I don't trust the experts, then A, make a decision and let him know he'll never wrestle again no matter what the experts say. Quit putting him through it. Quit sending him to the damn experts because it doesn't apparently matter. If every doctor they've sent him to is saying, hey, he's good, then it's a missed opportunity at that point. The health concerns, I understand, but in the end, it is a missed opportunity to not bring him back. Maybe make it a little more limited. Maybe force him to say, look, you can't do all the crazy shit you like to do sometimes. Limit a little bit of more, but he's still going to go out there because he's so technically sound. He knows how to wrestle, in my mind, with that concern and that risk at play. I believe Daniel Bryan's smart enough and good enough to put on fantastic matches, but work a style that's not going to put him in that type of risk. So to me, it really, based off of Daniel Bryan's own words in that interview, there is absolutely no reason they should not put him back in the ring at some point. And because you know your options at this point. Like, you know your options. You know your options are to put him back in the ring because you don't have a good enough reason to blame his health anymore. Or the other option is he's going to leave and go work for somebody else. And
sure.
And whether they respect him as a top star or not, Nick, I think is irrelevant. They know he draws enough. I mean, they wouldn't even keep him around in such a prominent role if they didn't feel like his draw power, I mean, merchandise sales, just the energy that he brings, all of that, if that wasn't worth something to them, I don't think that they'd even handle him the way they have handled him since the injury. So I feel like at this point, you've got two options, and one really seems unacceptable to me. I will be blown away if WWE does not bring him back and put him in a match. So that being said, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, and I don't think it's WrestleMania 34 though. Regardless of whether he's able to go or not, I don't think that it makes enough. Like at this point, there's no reason to rush it. Don't rush him back to WrestleMania. Maybe he comes out at WrestleMania. Maybe he gets involved. Maybe then they give him the green light and he sets something up at Mania. But don't put him into a Mania match at this point last minute. I feel like give him a real true return. Let him be the focal point for a few months. And obviously anytime after Mania, that would be possible. So other than that, Nick, I know another story that came out before we wrap up is, of course, we've got Mark Henry being announced for the Hall of Fame. I didn't expect any more announcements. I thought it was a pretty packed Hall of Fame as it was, but clearly I would surely assume this is the last one. Actually, before we get into that, since I already brought it up, Nick, there was one other story that I wanted to ask you about because I know it's interesting to me, and you and I talked a little bit off the air. But first and foremost, Mark Henry going in. I'm a fan of Mark Henry, really, especially his last few years. I thought he was great. I don't know that he was worth the mega contract that he got. What was it, some absurd 10, 15 years, something crazy? It was like it was like a NFL contract if they made contracts for 10 years versus, normally the 3, 4, 5. I mean, it was insane, the contract this guy got. He could never really stay healthy. But deserved. I mean, he really does deserve this. I like Mark Henry. I thought he's obviously reinvented himself time and time and again, been a part of some absolute crazy storylines, yet still when they want him to come back and be that big brute that he is and actually had a couple of really meaningful runs there towards the end, Nick. I like it. But overall, 2018 Hall of Fame, how do you feel like it's shaped up? Are you excited about this one?
Absolutely. I think every inductee, I don't usually ever give too much credence to the celebrity inductees. I kind of think that's just sort of a bonus thing that they do. But even talking about a guy like Kid Rock, certainly his influence in WWE has been there. And he's just as good as any other celebrity to put into that wing of the Hall of Fame because again, he has really sort of left his mark on the company. But I think it's a solid class. I mean, Bill Goldberg headlining, great call there. Certainly someone who kind of transcended WCW during the Monday Night Wars. So good to see him getting his due. Had a fantastic return to WWE. Really enjoyed his last run. I think overall, a lot of people really enjoyed Bill Goldberg's second run there in WWE. Sort of earned what he deserved, that run that he deserved in WWE. So, yeah, up and down, I think they're great decisions. Mark Henry, I think, caps off what's going to be a very solid class this year.
Nick, real quick, a question that we got from Facebook, and then my cousin David also just chimed in a message asking if we could talk about the greatest Royal Rumble coming up from, what is it, Saudi Arabia, I think they're doing it at?
Yeah, Saudi Arabia, the greatest Royal Rumble, 50 participants in this Royal Rumble. I mean, they're going to have to bring, like, you and I in for the show. I don't know how much talent they have.
Well, I mean, this is an interesting concept, and I think that it's been played up, but it's also been downplayed a little, if that's even possible, on certain shows. I feel like how meaningful do you think this is ultimately going to be? I mean, the winner's going to get something out of it. I mean, but I mean, are they pushing anything? I mean, what is there a defined? I actually don't know the answer to this. Is there a defined prize that they get? Do they get to challenge anybody? I mean, it's just a bragging rights type of situation.
Well, I mean, I don't know. You know, it's always something that could be added. The latest that we reported over at ProWrestling.com is that, you know, WWE announced this morning, actually, that 7 title matches will take place at this big event, in addition to the 50-man greatest Royal Rumble match. And Roman Reigns actually revealed over the weekend, I think he kind of spilled the beans on it, that this will be a WWE Network special. So that idea of there being a prize, if this is aired on the WWE Network, that's now become a much more important question.
Right.
What is on the line in this match?
Yeah.
If this were a non-televised WWE event, you really don't have to give anything away. You got title matches. You really don't have to provide anything more than that sort of big moment of that final elimination to send the fans home happy. But if you're airing this as a network special, you need to come up with something. And I suppose my question is, not only what, could it be a title shot at the next big pay-per-view? You know, the next big pay-per-view is not until August, which would be SummerSlam. So I don't know if you could wait that long. You know, that's almost 4 months. But it could be the next pay-per-view, you know, on the WWE Network, depending on, you know, we now know that all pay-per-views following Backlash, starting with Backlash, actually, are going to be dual branded shows. So, you know, whoever wins could appear on the next pay-per-view and get that title shot. But what do you think of that? Does it belittle the Royal Rumble match that takes place in January that awards sort of the ultimate prize, which is main eventing in a title shot at WrestleMania?
No, I think as long as that they behind the scenes decide whoever wins this is obviously going to they're obviously going to get a big push out of it. Look at it as like a King of the Ring style type of situation where, hey, you know, Owen Hart made that into something. And of course, you know, so did somewhat Steve Austin. But I feel like you can use some of these big events, whether it's non-televised or not. Obviously, they were gonna put it over. I think it's crazy to non-televise something like that, but I like it as kind of a special. I think that's good. It draws some attention to the network, which at times they don't do enough of, in my mind, with the exception of the pay-per-views. I feel like they build up some of these specials that they have. There's a big women's special that's coming up or is on the WWE Network that's interesting, kind of showing some of the behind the scenes of Ronda Rousey's appearance and just, again, more of the evolution of the women's division. But I think they're missing the mark again. I mean, you put on a 50-man Battle Royal Rumble type thing, and you don't allow the winner to utilize that. It's kind of insane. It's a Money in the Bank scenario. It's the King of the Ring scenario. Allow it to mean something, obviously, at the end of it. But I do think it would somewhat short-sighted a little bit of what the Royal Rumble's all about to then say, hey, the winner's going to get some sort of title match afterward. I don't think that needs to be the gimmick, but just, again, behind the scenes, understand that whoever wins this does need, especially if it's televised, but needs to get a push out of it. And I think that's the way they're going to go. But I mean, it's a huge monumental thing that they're doing there. They're doing a lot of that lately, clearly, with the women's battle royal and the women's elimination chamber match. They're trying to, create a little bit, and I'm okay with that as well. So I'm very interested to see. Before we move on though, Nick, and we don't have a lot of time to talk about this because I kind of forgot we were going to, so we stretched out the other conversations, but the fabulous Moolah Battle Royal, speaking of that they've got, is now some people kind of made some issues about it. And I guess a couple of people that trained under Moolah came out and spoke out against it. And then most importantly, Snickers, the one of the advertisers for the event, then comes back and says, hey, we have an issue with this, and we're disappointed. And, of course, that's the bottom line. That's Vince McMahon's money. Clearly, he's going to take that serious. I don't want to make a lot about politics, Nick, and I don't want to talk about necessarily the accusations. You and I talked a little bit about this off the air. We don't know what's true, what's not true. One person that trained or worked way back in the day with Moolah says that she did a lot of bad stuff. Another person said she was fantastic. I don't want to get it. She's never been charged with anything. Should be an innocent till proven guilty scenario. But look, it's the wrestling business, and if there's enough people saying something where there's some smoke, there's normally fire. So I certainly believe that maybe Moolah isn't this amazing person that she's kind of been made out to be in certain video packages. Obviously, she was on TV for a long, long time, and they were still putting her over. My biggest concern, Nick, not so much about people making a fuss about it. That's fine. But where are those same people, and where's WWE's response at the same time to someone like, you brought him up, and I think when you look up and down like the Hall of Fame, some of the stuff that they've done with some of these guys, there's plenty of people, Ultimate Warriors being a very good example that you mentioned earlier. They give out an award now for him. They're doing it this year, so it's not like something in the past. This is a current event. And he's got videos, actual public videos that you can find of him being very homophobic, serious beliefs that he's got. Whether it makes him just an all-around bad person or not, you can make your mind up. But it's not like he's a saint by any stretch. The guy was kind of kooky in a lot of ways too. But he was a straight homophobe. I mean, without a question, and with equal rights being to the forefront of homosexuals and women in general. When you want to look up and down a card, it's interesting that this one is going to be the place where WWE makes the statement, where the social justice warriors decide to make the statement. I mean, fabulous Moolah of all things. Again, if she is guilty of what they're accusing her of, then I understand maybe not honoring her. I get that, and I would be on board with it if that stuff was true. But you're really, again, and this is kind of the thing that I think some of the social justice warriors don't consider when they go into this. Hey, use your voice. That's what it's there for. I'm perfectly fine with you trying to make change, but you go down a slippery slope. When you take a form of entertainment like the WWE, and then you decide to start saying, look, we don't agree with this and we don't agree with this, then you're really going to open it. You better know exactly what your guidelines are. What pulls pushes your buttons? What is your guidelines? Because if you have a narrow-minded thing of this is what's right and this is what's wrong, the wrestling business is going to be the wrong place for you to decide you want to be a fan, yet you want to be morally and ethically perfect. Sure. I mean, it really is, because there's going to be you can't be a fan of this guy because he did this. I mean, I'm not saying that WWE is just full of awful people, but at the same time, I am really surprised, Nick, that this is the statement. This is the person that's going to get caught up in some of these movements and stuff that WWE decided to do it, and that the fans are getting on board with this. I mean, as much as they have been. This is a really interesting one to decide to go down this rabbit hole with.
Well, and listen, I'll say this because, again, I don't want to, again, just like you said, I don't want to get into the accusations or anything like that. Guys, for those of you who are not aware, we have been covering this whole story over at ProWrestling.com. So if you're not aware of some of the allegations that have been made, and remember, these haven't just come up in the past week. These are things that have been written and said about, fabulous Moolah for years and years now. If you want to get caught up on all of that and sort of the genesis of this, head over to ProWrestling.com. We've covered it quite extensively over the past week. So I don't want to get into that, but my statement here is your question as to why is this happening now proves to you the strength of the almighty dollar. And that's what this comes down to.
It's the Snickers thing.
We live in a time period now where social media is much more prolific than, say, when Ultimate Warrior was having his time and was making some of his comments.
Sure.
So things didn't spread as quickly and as rapidly and catch such tremendous fire as they do today. But most importantly, corporate sponsors did not object to those moves in the past. Snickers, their biggest sponsor right now, sponsoring WrestleMania, the biggest event of the year, came down on WWE for this decision. And that's who they're listening to. So just to be clear here, when Stephanie McMahon sent her tweet saying,
we're listening.
We listened to the voice of the people.
Right.
No, you didn't listen to the voice of the people.
Right.
You listened to the voice of Snickers. You listened to the possibility of your pocketbook being affected by this.
Right.
Of business being affected by this. When Snickers called you on the phone and said, what I'm presuming is you better change the name of this battle royal or there's going to be consequences on our end.
Yep.
And that's when WWE decided to pull the plug on the battle royal. Not because of what we thought.
Right.
Fans have been upset because, remember, WWE writes their own history. They write the history books when it comes to WWE. So if they want to write their own history as it pertains to the Ultimate Warrior, as it pertains to other people in the past who they've honored that maybe have had questionable backgrounds or these similar types of issues come up surrounding their inclusion in things like this, or like we've said, setting up a Warrior Award, that they can ignore that if they want. WWE will and can ignore things like that and have the fans choose to believe. It doesn't matter what the internet says. It doesn't matter what the fans believe.
That's true.
We've seen it time and time. How many times have they done it in storylines where, we've said, wait a minute, are we supposed to believe that that's true when we saw something happen 2 years ago with this guy?
Right.
Are we supposed to believe that Bray Wyatt's Bray Wyatt and he's not Husky Harris anymore? We saw him 2 years ago as Husky Harris, however long, but
Right.
WWE writes its own company history, and that's in storyline and that's in reality.
True.
So as it pertains to Fabulous Moolah and the question of why now, it's because it hasn't bothered a corporate sponsor. It hasn't affected their bottom line in a money capacity, and that's the reason why they're making the change.
And that's
now,
a good
as
point.
opposed to in the past.
And I just thought of this too as we wrap up. Hulk Hogan, is sitting on the sidelines and can't come back because of his racist remarks. And obviously, it got a ton of publicity. He was in the middle of a lawsuit over a sex tape. That's of course when some of those hidden cameras is what caught him saying the things he did. There's cameras all over Ultimate Warrior really stands out in my mind, obviously, as a blaring kind of red mark that could come up at some point as well. But at the same time,
and also this makes you wonder, could this whole Moolah thing affect Hogan's potential to come back?
Which I think was getting closer.
If a corporate sponsor is going to get upset about this, and we know that WWE has sort of been slowly warming up to that idea of maybe bringing Hogan back in some capacity. Yeah. They've been mentioning him more on television and in video packages and that kind of things. Could this do some damage? And again, it all goes back to, it's that same idea. It's when people argue, WWE sucks now because it's PG and it shouldn't be. And are they going to go back to being TVMA? They are not going to do anything that bothers their sponsors or their advertisers. It's all about what those guys, those companies, the money is what dictates their decisions. So, Hogan is a great point, and could this Moolah situation affect Hogan?
I don't see how it doesn't.
I guess that would depend on when they wanted to bring him back. But again, you run the risk of upsetting people and the people that pay the bills at the end of the day.
I don't see how it can't affect Hogan coming back at this point. I think the publicity around that would be more than they really want to bite off at this point. Look, moral of this at this point, guys, is watch what you say, especially if you're ever going to run for office or if there is no closet that cannot be opened anymore. There's not somebody at this point that's willing to come forward
Hey, man, I broadcast this show directly in front of a closet.
That's true.
I mean, you open this thing up and just, the crypt keeper and all sorts of skeleton bones just come flying.
I'm telling you,
at it.
man, it is a different world, and obviously, people are going to suffer. Good people, bad people are going to be affected, and WWE is just doing what they have to do, whereas you mentioned, and I agree with you 100% spot on, this has nothing to do, despite how they spin it, listening to the fans. This is listening to the advertisers that pay them, even though the fans ultimately pay them too. There's too many of you, and most of you don't believe what you say to begin with. Vince doesn't think so, especially. You're going to keep buying tickets. In their mind, you're not as important. It is about the almighty dollar, and it's unfortunate in some ways. But look, I don't mind this stuff being brought to life. I think battles have to be chosen wisely at this point because some of it could just get out of hand, and I think there's good movements that suffer as a result of that, and so we'll see and follow this story as we go. Guys, we really appreciate, though, you tuning in, and we made a comment or made an announcement last week just to follow up on that. I want to give you a little bit more details. Beginning next week, VLW will officially be launching on Fight TV. We're very excited about this new deal, which will see the show distributed every week via Fight, but the show will remain, of course, available on VLW's website as well and on ProWrestling.com and, of course, on other outlets. We'll have more details on the launch in the coming days, but for now, we really encourage fans to check out Fight.tv for more information. By the way, that's spelled F-I-T-E, Fight.tv, and we also encourage you, this is really important, to download the Fight app via the Apple App Store and, of course, Google Play. So really excited about that, and we'll have some more information in the coming days. But, Nick, all in all, great week, man. I'm looking forward to it, but momentum's building. We're heading into Mania. Voice of Wrestling's been on 2 weeks in a row. We've got new graphics because of Will. Things are just, the world's in order right now, and we're excited about it. So why don't you take us home, and, guys, we'll see you next week.
VOW fans got a lot to look forward to. I, just like Chris said, very excited about the Fight TV announcement. We're steamrolling into WrestleMania 34, and we can't wait for you guys to join the ride along with us into New Orleans. We will talk to you soon.
Enjoy Raw, everybody.